We got sound again. This is Basic Judaism. And we have been changing our topic every week. And this week we're going to talk about holiday traditions. So what I've done here is I've handed out something that I got this from a children's guide about holidays. It's called The Kids Catalog of Jewish Holidays by David A. Adler. And I don't know that you're going to be able to see this online, but we'll talk about it. This one is, we have more people? Can you hand out to more people? More people came in. I'm going to talk briefly about the calendar so you know where we are in things, and the Jewish calendar generally, but I wanted to talk primarily about traditions, holiday traditions. So we had just finished talking about the fact that there are 4 seasons in the year. There's actually 4 New Years as well on a Jewish calendar. Most of us, when we think of New Year, if I were to say Happy New Year to you in a Jewish tradition, it would be the New Year that comes in the fall. And that's the New Year when we change there was a comedian who used to joke about how, last month was Rosh Hashanah and I'm still writing 57.75 on my checks. We are now in the year 5,775, which is supposedly 5,775 years since creation, which is a story we may have to get into at some point. Do you really believe that we're only 5,775 years since the very beginning? And almost everybody, good. So we have front row is shaking their head yes, and the back rows are saying no. And the point is, if you add up all those years, that's a year from there. Does it bother me that there are things that happened before? It doesn't bother me. I joke that math was never my best subject, so the fact that it's fuzzy math doesn't bother me at all. But it really doesn't bother me at all. We can talk about that another time. But that's supposedly 5,775 years. And it's either from creation or from the day that the humans were created. That the new year represents possibly the beginning of the world or when humans were created. It is debated in Talmud. The rabbis have been debating that forever. I used to always believe it was from the creation of the world, that's one of the things we're celebrating. But there are some rabbis who say, no, it's actually the creation of humans. It's okay, it was a long time ago. 5,775 years ago was a long time ago. That year is going to change again in the fall when we have Rosh Hashanah this year. So the holiday, so that's 1 year, one kind of way of thinking years. Rosh Hashanah means the head of the year, it's the beginning of the year. But the biblical calendar tells us that the first month of the year is in the spring. So if the first month is in the spring, it's called the month of spring in the Torah, then wouldn't you think that that's the beginning of a calendar year? It kind of is, but it kind of isn't. So I like to look at it a little bit like if you have a birthday, and unless your birthday is January 1st, there's a whole bunch of year that happens before you were even born. Is it possible that there was a whole bunch of year that happened before the world was even born? It's possible. That's a good way of thinking about it, maybe. At some point we were thinking about it that way. But anyway, we have on the beginning of the months, when we're counting first month, second month, third month, we're in the springtime, which is a practical time to think about beginnings anyway. In the Torah, it says on the first day of the 7th month, you're supposed to make yourself a holy convocation, a holy separate kind of day, and that's Rosh Hashanah. It tells us it's the first day of the 7th month. So we already have 2 different New Years. And then we've got 2 more years. One is the birthday for the trees, which comes around January. It's on here, it's Tu B'Shvat, the 15th of the month of Shvat, which is in around January or sometimes February. And then we've got the New Year for the livestock. And that's also in the fall. That's closer to coinciding with the New Year that we call Rosh Hashanah. And why is it important to know what the birthday of the trees or the birthday of the livestock are? Because there are guidelines in the Torah, there are commandments that say you're not allowed to eat the fruit of the tree if it's less than 3 years old. Well, how do you know how old a tree is. Were you there for the birth of it? No. So if you get to Tu B'Shvat and there's a little sapling, and then you get to it again and you get to it again, you know it's 3 years old. It's not about the day that it was born, but it's like we lived in Lexington, Kentucky before here, and that's how they do horse, the horses that are racing horses. Every horse has the same birthday. So, and I think it's in January too. Anybody know? I don't know. I think it's in January. So if you are trying to race a 2-year-old horse, and if the birthday is in January, if your horse was born in December, then you're only a few weeks old. If you're, some horses are almost a whole year old before they even start counting. So some horses have advantages over others. But anyway, some trees will have advantages over others. And some cattle will have advantages over others. That's the way it's going to work. But, all right, so we've got that. Let's talk then. We've got seasons. I want to tell you also that the Jewish calendar is based on a lunar solar calendar. It's not just lunar. The Muslim calendar is just lunar. In the Torah, it says when the new moon happens, when you see that either no moon in the sky or the very, very, very beginning of the first sliver of the new moon, that's when the new month is. New moon, new month. It's not a coincidence. The word month comes from moon, comes from the word moon. So a new moon and a new month coincide according to the Jewish calendar. But you know enough about math and science to know that it takes about 4 weeks. Let's imagine that we're thinking I know I did, when I was in elementary school and I learned about the phases of the moon, we started with the full moon, right? And you went from full, and then you got this, and you got a little crescents and whatever, and then you got no moon, and then you got this, and then you got the full moon again. And we had to go out and we had to chart and try to see the moon every night and try to draw a picture. That was somewhere in elementary school. How long does it take to go, let's say, from full moon to full moon? How long? 4 weeks, 28 days, right? Approximately. So 7, 7, 7. It's about 4 weeks, 28 days. If we have a month let's say every month, because it's every time we get to the cycle again, is 4 weeks long, then 28 times 12 is going to be shorter than what we have now, which is 30 days, has September, April, June, and November, and all the rest of it. We're gonna have fewer days because our months don't typically have the 28 days. We have 12 months that are 28 days. It's going to be shorter than a solar calendar. Is that a problem? It's not a problem for the Muslims to keep counting that way. That's fine for them. But on the Jewish calendar, we have a problem if that's the only thing we take into consideration. We know that the new month has to begin when there's a new moon, not the full moon. The full moon will always mean we're in the middle of a month. Always mean we're in the middle of the month. But if we get to that new moon, and we get to it again, and we multiply times 12, our year is going to get shorter. So we know that Passover has to be celebrated in the middle of the first month, when we have a full moon in the first month. We know that. And God says you have to always have Passover in the middle of the first month. But if our first month keeps going backwards, and it's called the month of the spring, it says that specifically in the Torah. If we were like the Muslim calendar, the month of the spring next year would be about 12-ish days earlier, and then the next year will be 12 days earlier, and pretty soon the month of the spring will be in the winter, and then it'll just keep going backwards. That would be bad, because God said that this has to be celebrated in the spring. So we compensate. How do we compensate? Just like how we compensate on the secular calendar, where we have 365 and a quarter days is a year. So every 4 years we have a leap year. We have leap years on the Jewish calendar, but instead of adding a day, we add a month. So 6 times on a 19-year schedule, we will add a whole month. And that's why on your chart it says there's also that the months in the fall are Tishrei, Cheshvan, and Kislev. And the months in the winter are Tevet, Shvat, and Adar, but in a leap year we'll have an Adar 2. That's officially the last month of the year, just like February gets there. February used to be the last month of the year. I can talk to you about that later, but I wanted to talk about holidays. The spring months are Nisan, Iyar, and Sivan, and the summer months are Tammuz, Av, and Elul. We are now in the summer, Anybody know what month we're in? We're in Av. We're in the month of Av right now. That's where we are on this. The month of Elul is the next one coming up. It doesn't start for, it's almost 3 weeks now. Once we start Elul, that's a month of preparation for the High Holy Days. So, when we talk about holiday, so that's just giving you a little bit about calendar stuff so you know where we are in things. It's a cool thing because you'll notice that most of the biblical holidays are either going to be on the new moon, most of them actually are going to be on the full moon. And that's not surprising. If your day starts in the evening, how do you celebrate if there's no light? And which is easier to spot, a full moon or a no moon? A full moon is easier to spot. And so it's not surprising that most of our holidays that are the biblical holidays start on a full moon. It's easier to spot. We're going to have light to celebrate with. Not all of them do. So we start then in the fall. So the things that I thought about. Now, somebody asked to do holiday traditions. I figured that if we were talking holiday traditions, then we would be talking about what we wear, what we eat, what services would be like if you went to services. What is it like at the house? Does that make sense? Traditions? Okay. So let's start at the beginning of the changing of the year thing. Let's start with Rosh Hashanah. So the word Rosh means head. Hashanah means the year. So the head of the year, Rosh Hashanah, the head of the year, the birth of a year. Head is the first thing that pops out when you're born too, hopefully. Rosh Hashanah is the head of the year. And it is the beginning of what we call the High Holy Day period. These are the holiest days on the Jewish calendar, partially because God tells us that in the Torah. And the new year is also called the day of the blasts of the shofar. And it is a time when we hear a shofar blast. There's a tradition that you hear 100 blasts of a shofar, 100 blasts of a shofar. So some of the things to notice on the holy days of the year, and let me mark these down, because some of these things are going to happen no matter which holiday you have. So I am going to, I'll write them first in order of the chronological order of when they come. So we have Rosh Hashanah, and then we have Yom Kippur, and those two are the ones that are called the High Holy Days, and the days in between are called the Days of Awe. And then we have Sukkot, and this wasn't a good choice of pen. And then at the end of Sukkot, we have Simchat Torah. And we also have another holiday here that a lot of people forget, but it's called Shemini Atzeret. These are all biblically ordained holidays. And then we get a break for a while, because that's a lot of holidays all packed together. And then we have Hanukkah, and I'm writing that in a different color because that's not a biblically ordained holiday. So the biblical ordained holidays are the ones in black. And then the next one that comes up is, well, actually we have others in between. So if I'm doing that one, wow, you've got it on your chart. What's it say the next one is? Tu B'Shvat, I think, comes first. Tu B'Shvat. And then we've got Purim. And then we've got Passover. And then, can you tell the difference between blue and black on there? And then which they're calling Pesach. And then we have Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day. And then we have Yom HaZikaron, which is Israeli Memorial Day, HaZikaron. It's hard for me to write these in English. And then we have Yom HaAtzmaut, which is Israel Independence Day. And then we have Yom Yerushalayim. It's Jerusalem Liberation Day, Yerushalayim. And then we have Shavuot, which is another biblical day. Shavuot. And then we have the holiday that's coming up this weekend, which is Tisha B'Av. And that's also in blue. And you can't see these at all because I'm writing too low. Tisha B'Av. So I made a distinction between black ones and blue ones, and the black ones are the ones that are holy days because those are ordained in the Torah. But in addition to those that I showed you there, we have Shabbat, and we have Rosh Chodesh, which I wrote on the bottom of the sheets I gave you. Shabbat comes every week, and Rosh Chodesh is the new year. It's the head of the year, and those are holy days also. So not for these two holy days, but for all of these holy days, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Simchat Torah, Shemini Atzeret, Passover, which is Pesach, and Shavuot, some of the traditions are the same. There's a tradition to wear white. There's a tradition that the synagogue will be wearing white. What does a synagogue wearing white mean? It means that the Torah will be covered in white. It'll have a white mantle. The rabbi, or whoever's leading the service, is supposed to wear white. Sometimes you'll have decorations on the pulpit and things like that will have all white. All of those holidays are white holidays. Why do you think we use white? Yeah, it's kind of a purity thing. I'm embarrassed to tell you that at one point someone once said that it was like someone once stood there on the pulpit on Yom Kippur, not in this congregation, at another congregation, and said, I always wonder how the blacks feel about the fact that white is the symbol of purity. I don't think it has anything to do with skin color. I just have to tell you that. I don't think that it has anything to do with the color, of skin at all. It's nothing to do with that. I think of it as especially during Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, when part of the purpose of those holidays is to kind of start with a clean slate. If you've got a new notebook at the beginning of school year, which is when this happens too, that new notebook has blank white pages. Maybe they got little blue lines on it, I don't know, but it's blank white pages. It means you're starting clean and fresh. I don't think it has anything to do with races, or none of those things. So Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, there's a tradition about wearing white. So if you go to synagogue, if you're in a traditional synagogue like an Orthodox synagogue, almost everybody will also be wearing white. If you come to B'nai Zion, very few people are wearing white because it's not specifically about what they're wearing. But the sanctuary will be dressed in white. So we will have all of the Torah coverings will be white. We will have things draped over our in the lecterns, etc. The flowers will all be white. For all of those holidays, all those holy days, the theme is a white theme. It's about starting fresh. It's about newness. It's a symbol of holiness. For the other ones, the blue ones, those are not considered holy days. Those are considered holidays. They came after Torah days. These two are holy days because they're ordained in the Torah, Shabbat and Rosh Chodesh. Shabbat, the sanctuary is not always dressed in white, but white is a symbol of Shabbat also. If you go to summer camp, almost every Jewish summer camp, Friday night, everybody is wearing white. It's white shorts and a t-shirt, but it's white. It's also because Shabbat is symbolic of, according to Kabbalah, to Jewish mysticism, Shabbat is a representation of a wedding between the Jewish people and Shabbat, and the Sabbath bride, it's called. And so one of the symbolisms is white for that. Your candles are usually white. And often there's other white, but our flowers here at B'nai Zion in most congregations, if they decorate with flowers, are not necessarily white. And other things don't have to be white. But white gives things a kind of a clean look to it. There's something special about it. Rosh Chodesh is the new month, and the sanctuary wouldn't have to be dressed in white for that. Rosh Hashanah, crash. Rosh Hashanah has, and Yom Kippur, some of the symbolisms. It is the most powerful. It is called days of awe. They are days when the liturgy changes to something very serious. We are taught at that point, we go look for God, and God is closer to us. I had once heard it described that it's kind of like, imagine that you need to talk to the IRS. And you're not sure if you fudged your books a little bit. And there are times if the IRS has to come to you, if it's waiting for you to go to them, that could be bad. But if they come to you and you get to sit face to face with them, then there's usually a little bit more leeway that they'll understand you, they'll listen to you. And that's kind of what it's like for here. That you can pay your taxes every year, you can do your things, you can fulfill obligations, you can apologize, you could mess up and apologize and things, and God will listen. But during the High Holy Days, it's like God comes and is local. God is going to sit at God's desk right here, and we're going to walk right up to God and say, well, I think I messed up. Can you show me what I did wrong and see if there's any way for me to fix this? And God will say, come here, honey, let me see what you have to do. And you look at it, and you talk together, and you say, oh my goodness, it's true, I forgot to light my Shabbat candles every week. Now what do I do? And God says, well, you should have lit your hot Shabbat candles every week, but I'll tell you what, we'll let it go this year. I see you're really sorry. You promise you're going to light candles next year? Yes, I promise. I can't believe I forgot every week. Oh my gosh, I'll do it again. So, okay, you'll be okay. And God is sitting right there in front of us. Although in our liturgy, God is considered, in all of the liturgy for the High Holy Days, God is our Father, our King. Avinu Malkeinu. And it becomes serious and solemn. You'll hear the music is going to reflect it. You'll hear the prayers reflect it. This is serious. God is considered our Father, our King. And it's kind of like, it makes me sad. I've said this before. It makes me sad when people don't come to Shabbat services every week. Because God is like a parent at Shabbat services also. But God is more like the kind of parent that you come home from school and God puts some milk and cookies in front of you and says, come here, honey, how was your day? Come here, tell me about your day. And you said, that kid was picking on me again and I don't know what to do. And you say, oh no, let's think about that. Let's talk about what we can do. And God is there to help you and is lovey-dovey and you're sitting on God's knee. Then we get to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and God is more like the, wait till your father gets home. What did you do this time? Wait till your father gets home. And it's not that God is going to do something awful. God is going to listen, but God is going to be a little more severe, and the music will reflect that. So when we have Shabbat, we have songs like Vishameru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat. It's nice and cheerful. And then you get to Rosh Hashanah, things like Avinu Malkeinu. Or you, yes, sir? Shabbat.
Does that represent God as the bride or the day that God created rest?
So the question was, does Shabbat represent, we talk about it in the Kabbalistic terms, according to Jewish mysticism, as a wedding. And what is the bride and what is the groom? Is it God or is it? So sometimes it's about God marrying Shabbat, but most often it's about we are the groom and Shabbat is the bride.
Shabbat is God?
Nope. Nope.
The day of rest that God created.
The day of rest that God created is Shabbat. And it's not that we're marrying God. That's another time. We get to do that at another time. Not exactly. What we do is, I'll show you. Sometimes there's symbolisms and there's awesome things, because the closer we are, at times like Shabbat, the closer we are to Shabbat, the more sparks go off, and the more awesome things are. But anyway, let's talk about celebrating. So Rosh Hashanah, you're going to see white, you come to the synagogue, you're going to have a lovely, delicious dinner, you're going to make sure you have some apples and honey. Apples and honey, apples represent a cyclical nature of the year, and the honey represents having a sweet year. And you're going to go to services. It's one of the most important days of the year. You're going to see that we will never, usually we have to set up in the social hall because we can seat a lot more people in there. When I was growing up, we didn't fill up the sanctuary on Friday nights, but for the high holy days, for Rosh Hashanah and for Yom Kippur, we had to go to Century Tel. And not only did we have to go to Century Tel and have thousands of seats, but we had to have two services. So, the A through L in the alphabet, if your last name started with A through L, you went at 6 o'clock, and if your last name started with M through Z, you'd go at 8 o'clock, and they do the same service twice, because that's how many people were coming. And you needed tickets because we still didn't have enough room, and it was crazy how many people came for the High Holy Days, because in this scenario, God is judge. And you may not have been the best Jew all year long, but you wanted to make sure that that God saw you show up for these days. Let's put it that way. It's a little bit more cheerful. You have some of the joyfulness of the new year, plus you've got 100 shofar blasts, and that's always cool. On Yom Kippur, it is
There's no difference in Rosh Hashanah and Yom Teruah, right? Like the same thing, but different.
Yom Teruah. Yeah, Yom Teruah is the day of the blasts, and that is the same thing. Exactly. Two different names for the same thing. Two different names for the same thing. Because in Torah, God calls it different things. God said, this is a day of blasts, so we say, ooh, is that a name for day of blasts, or is that just what God is calling? That Rosh Hashanah, it doesn't say Rosh Hashanah anywhere in Torah. It doesn't call it that. It says that it's a day of blasts, and it's a day of judgment. It's called Yom Hadin, the judgment day, and it's called Yom HaTruah, the day of blasts, and those are what God calls it. It's just got lots of names. As a matter of fact, one of the things, we'll get to that after we do Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is the day of atonement. The Day of Atonement this is complicated for some people because it sounds like Jews can be rotten all year long, but if they come to services on Yom Kippur and they fast all day, then they're forgiven and they're good for another year. But that's not how it works. Atonement is supposed to happen whenever you do something wrong. According to Jewish tradition, everybody is born good, and everyone has the capacity to make choices, and everyone has within them an inclination for good and an inclination for bad, and you're hoping that the good inclination wins out and you're making good choices, but sometimes you make bad choices. If you make a bad choice, you are obligated to make good on that choice. If I steal a scarf, I am obligated to return the scarf. I may wind up having to do some community service. I may have to pay for it anyway. I have to apologize to the person I stole it from. I've got to do those things to make up for a bad choice. If I did something to a person that was bad, like stealing a scarf, I have to deal with that person. I can't steal a scarf and then come on Yom Kippur and apologize to God, and God said, oh, no problem. I have to apologize to the person when I do something wrong to a person. And you have to do it as soon as you can after the problem, or whenever you can do that. You've got to try to do that. There's a tradition that you're supposed to atone the day before you die, and since you don't know what day you're going to die, you should be atoning every day. You should go to bed every night with a clean slate, having been forgiven, having tried to be forgiven, forgiving other people. You should try to do that. But for the sins that you do, and sins is a complicated word. Sin means missing the mark. Like if you're an archer and you try to hit the bullseye, you might get close. You might not exactly hit the target. That's what happens in life. We try. All right, I will keep Shabbat. I'll light my candles. Oops, I lit them a little too late. That's missing the mark, and that's between you and God. You have to figure out how angry God is or not is about that, but you're going to deal with that. The things that you do between you and God are the things specifically that God is going to deal with. And it's really helpful to have a day that you set aside to think about it. It's really helpful to have a day when you are trying to figure out what your year was like and how you can make next year a better year. And, most of us are not rotten people. It's not always about really terrible things. The tradition on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur goes like this. On Rosh Hashanah, God opens up this book of life. And in the book is everything you've done. All of your deeds, all of the choices you made this year are in this book. And God takes all the good things you did and puts them on this part of a scale. And God takes all the bad choices you made and puts them on this side of the scale. If your scale goes wonk, you did really wonderful things and most of your things were good, God has a brand new, clean, white page book that God writes your name in the book of life. So good things are going to happen for you this year. If your scale goes bonk, that most of what you did during the year was bad, then God writes you immediately for a bad year or a year of death. It's not a good year. But if you are like most people, your scale is going to be somewhere here and it's just going to keep going, I'm not sure which one it is. And so you have these days of repentance, the days of awe, to think about what's on the bad side and pull things out one at a time. Oh yeah, I didn't do this. I should have done this. If you do that, if you recognize that that was something you should have made a better choice on, this side gets lighter, and this side immediately gets heavier just for having thought of that. And then when you make good on it, whatever that was, if you think about it and you apologize or you do whatever, then this side gets even heavier. And so all of the things that you're doing during this time is supposed to be a way of trying to tip the scales in your favor. It's not a coincidence that the zodiac sign for this time of the year is Libra, which are those balance scales. You want to know why it wasn't a coincidence? Is another story about how astrology is also part of Jewish history. But on Yom Kippur, it's all about the scales and all about tipping the balance and all about making it. There is also a belief that every moment you can imagine that your scales are always like this, every moment in life, and that whatever it is that your next choice is the thing that's going to tip the scales in your favor. Every choice you make can be the one that tips the scales in your favor. It's not pressure. It's actually kind of helpful. That the next thing I do is going to be a good thing. It's a very helpful thing. At the end of Yom Kippur, so Yom Kippur you're wearing white, and Yom Kippur, or it's a tradition, but not everybody does that. You'll see a lot of people, if you came to services here, not wearing white. You'll see a lot of people at Agudath Achim, which is a traditional service, not wearing white. But again, the sanctuary will be wearing white. You have to have a nice meal before Yom Kippur begins. It has to be before Yom Kippur begins, because once the sun goes down on Yom Kippur, it's a fast day, which means it goes really slowly, because you are obligated to 5 different fasts. And this is according to Torah. So you're obligated to 5 fasts, and the fasting is according to Torah. The 5 fasts are no food, which you said, oh yeah, well that's what fast means, right? No drink. There are a lot of people I know who think that a fast means that I could drink water all day long. There's no water, no drink. No bathing or anointing. It's not about you and how clean you are, it's about your soul. No wearing leather. What? Why is that a fast? There are a whole bunch of reasons that are given there. One is you're going to be well grounded. You get to feel the ground. Also, you're not using animals for your benefit. This is a day when you are at your most humble. It's a day when you're most connected, you to your soul, you and your soul to God. It's not about how you're using the planet for your own benefit. And then the last is the no sex. And I love saying that when the little kids are, what? No sex? Ah, she said sex. And I look at them and I say, you could do it for one whole day. You could just wait one day, no sex for one day. Anyway, because it's not about your physical needs. It's about ignoring your physical needs and only focusing on the spiritual. Your soul does not need breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Your soul does not need water. Your soul does not need shoes. Your soul does not need... The strange one has to do with the bathing. The bathing has to do with a couple of things. One is it's about the cleanliness. It's not about, you're not supposed to worry about what you smell like or whatever. You're not supposed to be worrying about that at all. But smells turn out to be important. In some traditions, smells are what keep you going during Yom Kippur. That they have like reviving salts all the time, all day long, that they're smelling that because that's okay for your soul. I don't know too many people at B'nai Zion or Agudath Achim that use that tradition, but that's kind of a cool tradition. At the end of Yom Kippur, which is supposed to be when the sun goes down and you see 3 stars in the sky, the shofar blasts that one time at the end of Yom Kippur. And hopefully that means that you have been forgiven. Tim has a question. Hi.
The 5 things you fast, is that a rabbinical things that they decided?
So the question is, are the 5 fasts rabbinical or are they Torah? The five items of fasting. So in the Torah it says it's a day of something like deprivation. And the rabbis tell us that that's what it means. So yes, it's a rabbinic decision to say that those 5 are the 5 things that you need.
So it's not Torah saying.
Right. Torah says it's a day of something like deprivation, and then the rabbis tell us what that means. And they tell us from legitimate ways. They find other places in the Torah where they say these are times when it was a commanded form of deprivation. But yes, the rabbis were the ones who it's according to oral law. It's according to Talmud, in the Talmudic law. So according to Jewish tradition, when Moses was on Mount Sinai, Moses received the written law, which we see in the Torah, in the 5 books of Moses, but Moses also received the oral law, which are the ways of understanding what the specifics are. And supposedly we were given those instructions on Mount Sinai, and it is now written down in the Talmud for us, but those guidelines were already given to us. These are not considered fences. He asked if they were considered fences. Fences are a time when, for example, if it says for Shabbat, you're not allowed to create because God rested from creating. So if I'm not allowed to create, then one of the ways of saying that is I'm not allowed to write because writing is creating something that wasn't there. So a fence would be not touching a pen or a pencil on Shabbat, because if I touch a pen or a pencil, I might be inclined to write. But if I don't even touch a pen, does God say don't touch a pen on Shabbat? No. But if I make a fence around it and I say I'm not even touching a pen, then I can't possibly break the law about writing because I'm not going to touch a writing utensil. That's a fence. This is not a fence. This is if God says, do this, and you say, okay, how do I do this? That's what this is. Maybe interpretation, but it's directly from Talmud. It's a lot like when we get our rules about Shabbat. How do we know what we're supposed to refrain from on Shabbat? Yeah. So there's she said, what about the things that happen just before Rosh Hashanah? So there are a bunch of things that happen. The whole month of Elul, which is the month before Rosh Hashanah, we are starting to get ourselves ready. If we were in a traditional world, we would be saying prayers at least 2 or 3 times a day. 2 to 3 times a day in a traditional world. The Reform movement doesn't typically do that, but we would be adding certain things every day. The Haftarah portions are already changing a little bit, getting us ready. The Saturday night before Rosh Hashanah we have a service called Slichot, which is forgivenesses. And we usually have it's supposed to happen at midnight. We don't do that very often at midnight here. But there's involved in that is a kind of a mini service that uses a lot of the liturgy to almost get you through the whole thing. It gets you in the mood for the High Holy Days. And we do have a service. In fact, yesterday we had a calendar meeting with people from Agudath Achim, and we have decided that there are some holidays where we're going to combine our forces for something like this. And so this year for Slichot, we're going to do it at their congregation, and we're going to be, let's see, for that one, he's showing a movie. We're actually also doing something this coming Saturday night for Tisha B'Av there. We're showing a movie Friday night, and they're doing songs, somber songs, all of Saturday night. But anyway, Slichot is something that comes up before. But that is something that is not a mandated holy day. That is just parts of what it is to get ready for the holiday. And it's something that we do. So Slichot, we'll talk. All right, so Yom Kippur, fasting, 5 fasts. At the end of the fast, we hear a Yom Kippur, we hear a shofar blast, And we believe and we pray that our prayers will have been heard, and that blast means that we are forgiven. The beginning of Yom Kippur, Erev Yom Kippur, Erev means evening, the evening of Yom Kippur. There is one of the most important prayers that we say during the year, Kol Nidre, which means all vows, that we ask that any of the vows that we made this preceding year, a vow, an oath, any of the vows we made this preceding year, if we had all intentions of keeping them and couldn't keep them, please forgive us for those. A vow is a legal obligation. So please forgive us for that. And it sets the tone of the whole holiday. And in fact, often the evening of Yom Kippur is called Kol Nidre because of it. And it is usually a prayer that is sung. It's usually sung 3 times. In our congregation, we have a tradition that the first time it's done by cello, which sounds like someone is crying. And the second time the choir sings it. And the third time we say it together. And it's something like, Kol Nidre. We have an English version that we teach the little kids. I'll teach you that instead of doing the whole thing. Kol Nidre, on the eve of Yom Kippur Day, we ask, O God, forgive us for promises we made, but did not keep this year. And that gives you, as opposed to Lishana Tova Tikatevu, that's the melody for Rosh Hashanah. On Yom Kippur, we get that. We get more somber, we get serious. The other point for Kol Nidre, though, that prayer about all of our promises, one of the other reasons why that was included in our liturgy was because of all of those times when the Jews were forced to convert or die, like the Spanish Inquisition, for example. And if they converted just to survive, but they don't really feel, in that case it was Catholic, for example, then they could say Kol Nidre, that prayer on Yom Kippur, and ask God to please forgive them for having promised that they were Catholic, because they're not really intending to be Catholic, but they had to save their lives. So that's another reason for the Kol Nidre prayer. And then 4 days after Yom Kippur, we have a holiday called Sukkot, which lasts a week, and Sukkot is in English called the Feast of Tabernacles. So starting with Sukkot, the other 3 pilgrimage festivals, Sukkot, Passover, Pesach, and Shavuot, those 3 pilgrimage festivals, I call them pilgrimage because people would walk to Jerusalem when the temple was standing. Wherever they lived in Israel, they would walk to Jerusalem with their offerings, and they would celebrate in Jerusalem. These 3 holidays especially have dual significance. So of these holidays, then, we often have harvest, like agricultural background to the holiday and historical background to the holiday. So Sukkot turns out to be a time when the harvest, the fall harvest, comes due. So think about things that are fruits and vegetables and animals, all these things that are coming to be harvested in the fall. Where I came from, it was things like apples and pumpkins and squash, and that's why Sukkot, by the way, is actually the origin of the holiday for Thanksgiving. That's why it's the same kind of things. It's what the pilgrims were doing, is that they were celebrating Sukkot with the natives. It's another story. But we build the word Sukkah. The word Sukkot means booths. We build these temporary huts. There's going to be one here. There's going to be one at Agudath Achim. Some of us build them at our houses. And you build them for 2 reasons. So one is the historical reason. It reminds us of what it was like to travel in the wilderness during the whole 40 years that we were in the wilderness after we were freed from Egypt. And it's a pretty rickety kind of a thing. It's an awesome thing. You're in it, and it's supposed to feel like you're aware of the elements. The roof, the schach, the roof, is supposed to be such that it was made from something that was alive, like branches from a tree, but it can't be connected to the tree anymore. And you put it on the roof, and you have to be able to see the stars through the roof. It doesn't protect you all that much. It protects you a little bit. You sit in it, and it's hot out, and you'll get some shade. But you sit in it, and it's raining out, and you'll get some wet. So Sukkot has a harvest element to it, and it has an historical. So the harvest element also, one of the reasons that I was taught that we build the sukkah is imagine that I've got fields and they're all coming to be ripe right now. Sukkot also, by the end of Sukkot, in Israel, we start the beginning of the rainy season. Almost to the day. It will start raining by the end of Sukkot, and the only time it's going to rain during the year is between Sukkot and the beginning of Passover. And if you have to gather your harvest, you should try to do that before it starts raining, because otherwise it'll rot in the field. And so one of the reasons why we would build a sukkah for the agricultural reason is I've got a field, I've got to gather as much as I can. What if I build, instead of coming all the way back to my house, what if I build a booth in the middle of my field and I sleep there? And in the morning I'm right there and I'm starting to gather and gather and gather. And I go to sleep, and in the morning I'm right there and I'm gathering and gathering. And I've got a whole week then to gather all of my harvest before the rainy season starts. So the booth serves two purposes. One was to be convenient for the harvest, and the other was because it reminded us of wandering in the wilderness. At the end of Sukkot, and by the way, each one of the ones that are in black and Shabbat, we start our holiday with lighting candles. And we usually start our holiday with wine and with challah. On Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the challah is usually round and not long and braided, because it reminds us of the circular nature of a year. For Sukkot, for Simchat Torah, for Passover, Shavuot, Labrit, we light candles at the beginning of the holiday. Why do we light candles? Well, one thing is, if our holidays all start, if the day begins when the night falls, then we need some light. Sukkot, by the way, is a full moon holiday. It's going to start on the full moon. Rosh Hashanah is the first day of the 7th month. Sukkot is the middle of the month. It's a full moon holiday. Passover is a full moon holiday. Shavuot is not. So we're outside and we've got a full moon. That's a really big help. In Shreveport, I don't know too many people, I don't know anybody actually who sleeps in their sukkah. In New York, lots of people sleep in their sukkah. In Israel, lots of people sleep in their sukkah. I have a sukkah at my house. I do not sleep in it because I am petrified of the ants. I have to just be really honest about that. It's not about between the mosquitoes and the ants. I don't want to be out there all night. I eat all of my meals in my sukkah, but I don't like to sleep out there. The end of it, we have Simchat Torah. You know what the word Torah is. It's talking about the scroll with the 5 books of Moses, or just the 5 books of Moses. Simchat Torah means the joy of Torah. And we celebrate that we have gotten to the end of a cycle of reading the whole Torah, all 5 books of Moses, in a year, in a cycle in a year. So we end the Torah, and it ends with Moses dying. And we begin the Torah, and it begins with Genesis in the beginning. And we try to show that it is a continuous cycle. So we read the very last words and immediately start again. We dance with our Torahs. We are joyful with our Torahs. It is called Simchat Torah, joy of Torah. We literally dance with our Torahs. We take all of the Torahs, and every congregation will do this, and we will go around, at least you go around 7 times, around the whole thing with dancing, and everybody holds the Torah and carries the Torah. There's a very cool tradition that some places do where they open up a Torah, they unwind the whole thing, unravel it, so that it would go all the way around the whole sanctuary. And then you get to hear and you get to see the beginning and the end like touching each other, knowing not just that it's a cycle that never ends, but you literally see the whole story in front of you. And it is a really cool thing. We do it sometimes with the kids, but most of the time we don't have enough people here to be able to hold a whole Torah open. In some communities where I've been, you can do that. Here we can't do that very often. But what does happen, though, is that, here's another married one, is that we marry the Torah. So each of us is called up to be kind of the groom, and the Torah is our bride. And they'll hold up a chuppah, which is the marriage canopy, and we'll get under there, and first we'll call up all the men, and then we'll call up all the women, and then we'll call up all the children. And each of us are groups that will get the honor of blessing the Torah. Each of us, it's our Torah. Dancing and things, and it's fun, and it's wonderful. The Torah also mentions Shmini Atzeret, which means the 8th day celebration, which is the very last day of Sukkot. We turn that into a holy day also. Light our candles at the beginning of this. White, again, we're celebrating. Sukkot, by the way, because we're out in our booth and because it's a harvest holiday, you try to eat a new fruit or vegetable that you haven't eaten yet that year. Each night, a different one. You also try to invite somebody else into your sukkah who's never been there before, or you invite imaginary guests. So it could be that the first night you invite Abraham and Sarah into your sukkah. And you have a conversation with Abraham and Sarah, and you figure out, well, how cool would it be to sit here and talk to them? The guests that you invite into the sukkah are called ushpizin. There's a great movie that came out just a few years ago from Israel called Ushpizin about Sukkot, and there's this Orthodox family that is dirt poor. They don't have enough money for a sukkah. They don't have enough money for... The other thing you do is you shake this lulav and etrog. The Torah talks about 4 species. You have a palm and a myrtle and a willow and an etrog, which is a citron, which is in the lemon family, kind of the quintessential citrus fruit. And you hold them together and you shake them in all the directions that God is, in front and behind and side to side and up and down. You smell. It smells wonderful. Shows where God is. And so this family doesn't have any money to buy the lulav, doesn't have any money to make a sukkah. And they also have been married for a little while and they still don't have a child. And so this is some of the things they're struggling with. They acquire a sukkah. Friends of theirs give them a sukkah, and then these guys show up. Apparently the man had a life that is maybe one someone shouldn't be so proud of before he got married. And these guys from jail kind of break out and come to his house and move into the sukkah with them. And they're trying to be nice to them, but these guys are making it hard to be nice to them. And it's a wonderful story. And it's all in Hebrew with subtitles, but it's great. Those are the holidays that we have for a while. We've got a whole month in between with no holidays except Shabbat and Rosh Chodesh. It's kind of a helpful breather. I love festivals. I love holidays. There are other things we do here, by the way. So Rosh Hashanah, on the first day of Rosh Hashanah in the afternoon, we have something called tashlich, where we send our sins into the water. And what we do is, and Jews do this all over the place, where you kind of empty out your pockets of whatever sins you happen to have in there. We do it with breadcrumbs. I like to do it with matzah that was still left over from Passover. And you usually take it to a body of water, and you throw it to the fish and the ducks. And we have been doing it the last few years. We used to do it at the duck pond, and then one year the duck pond kind of dried up, and that was yucky. We did it sometimes at a boat dock, but that was kind of small and hard to manage. Last few years we've been going to the Glen, the retirement home, because they have water there with ducks and fish, and this place where we can stand is covered. It's on a wooden porch kind of thing with a covering, so no matter how hot it is or no matter how rainy it is, we can do it anyway. And we also have people who are residents there. For the first few years we did it because we had a resident who was in her hundreds, and she would come with us and throw things, and we had others, and she's since passed. May her memory be a blessing, Alice Meyer. But we have other people there, and even the non-Jewish people who are there, the residents, they come out and they're joining us now, and we have a wonderful brief ceremony, and we throw our food into watch the fish and the duckies eat our stuff, and they love it too. They like tashlich. So those are some of the things, and I bet I'm forgetting things. Then we've got 3 holidays that come up that are not Torah-mentioned holidays, because they are, well, actually, let's do it. Hanukkah. You know the story of Hanukkah. We light a menorah every night. It's a family-oriented kind of thing. You light candles. Ideally, maybe you're doing this at home. You're going to light menorah. In my family, everybody who came to our house, whether it was family or not, everybody had their own menorah. You could bring it if you want, but you really didn't have to because we had a collection. And so on the first night, you light the shamash and you light 1 candle. There's songs that you sing, the foods that you eat, because of the miracle of the oil. The foods that you eat are usually oil-based foods like potato pancakes and donuts, and then there's also gelt, which is money, but usually we have chocolate gelt, and we play with a dreidel, and if you don't know these things, we will talk about them more as we get through. But this last year we started a tradition in Shreveport where we went to all the retirement homes for Hanukkah also. Every retirement home that has at least one Jew in it, we went to, and we gathered everybody who wanted to come, even the non-Jews, and we would often have like 2 Jewish people and 30 non-Jewish people, and we'd give everybody latkes, and we'd give everybody donuts, and we'd give everybody dreidels, and we'd sing songs, and we'd tell the story of Hanukkah, and we had a ball, and we're going to do that again, but I'm hoping more people are going to come with us. It's not about just those people. It's a way for the community to celebrate together. So Hanukkah comes around usually around December. 2 years ago it came for Thanksgiving, and that was weird. It's not going to do that again for a minute. Tu B'Shvat is the birthday for the trees. And it's kind of cool because we celebrate by thinking about ecological things. We try to be responsible for the environment, and we turn it into something about that. So we also have a Tu B'Shvat Seder, like a Passover Seder. Instead of having 4 cups of wine that are just boring cups of wine that represent the 4 ways that God told us we are leaving Egypt, on Tu B'Shvat, for the birthday of the trees, we have 4 cups of wine that change color. So you go from just white and then a little bit of red in it and a little bit more red until red. So you see the seasons kind of passing before you in the wine that you have. And we eat from the different kinds of fruits and nuts that come from trees. We divide them into things like all of the kinds of things that have shells on the outside that you can't eat, but you can eat the inside. And then there's another time where it's only the ones that you can eat the outside but not the inside. And then you've got one that you can eat everything of. And it's traditionally a time when we think about planting trees in Israel, and that's a cool thing too. Purim is when we celebrate the story of the book of Esther, of another freedom time where people tried to kill us and we win. That's most of these. There was once a joke that said, this circulates a lot, that almost every Jewish holiday can be summed up in a nutshell. They tried to kill us, they didn't, let's eat. Because every single holiday has special foods, so Hanukkah we talked about. Tu B'Shvat has the fruit of the tree. Purim, you have these triangular cookies called hamantashen that are usually filled with things like prunes or chocolate. I like the chocolate ones, apricots and all kinds of yummy stuff, and we do that. We have a carnival here for the kids. Purim is a time where there is a commandment that says you're supposed to get so happy that you can't tell the difference between blessing Mordechai and cursing Haman, the good guy and the bad guy. And there aren't very many ways to get that kind of happy. So think about it. Yeah, that's one way. It could be wine or stronger than wine, even that's one way. We also, it's a traditional time we get dressed up. I think you'll find in almost every culture there is a holiday that at the end of this winter, you've been cabin fevered too much and you want to break out and go gaga. So it's similar to a carnival and it's similar to a Mardi Gras that we get dressed up in costumes. It's the one time during the year that the Talmud teaches us that men are allowed to wear clothing, dress up like women, and women are allowed to dress up like men. It's kind of nice to actually conceal who you are and just go crazy. So Purim is a time when we do that. There's a tradition about bringing food or goodies to other people. That's one of the commandments about Purim, is bringing treats to other people. You're going to find there are a lot of holidays that have become kind of American holidays that or other holidays that are fun. Like people like Halloween, they get dressed up and then they get food. For us, we have a holiday where you get dressed up in costume and you give away food. People like decorating a tree, and we have Sukkot, when you decorate the sukkah and you live in it. You deal with nature and you decorate a sukkah. We have times when we're giving food, giving presents, celebrating. We've got something of everything here. Passover, celebration of freedom. Passover has serious restrictions on the kind of food you're supposed to eat because you're not allowed to have anything leavening, anything with chametz, and we'll talk about that again. We did that a little last time. So we've got matzah and matzah balls and all of these things that come out of Passover things. The last of the biblical holidays is Shavuot, which is the festival of weeks. We just did that a few weeks ago, where we celebrate the receiving of the commandments. The tradition about Shavuot is you eat dairy things. That's a tradition on Shavuot, but again, another white one. These, the blue ones here, Yom HaShoah is Holocaust Remembrance Day. And that always comes in the spring. And Yom HaZikaron is Israel Memorial Day, and Yom HaAtzmaut is Israel Independence Day. And in Israel, they do Yom HaZikaron on one day, and the very next day is Yom HaAtzmaut. And it's a very powerful thing because there's nobody in Israel who hasn't had a loss, whether it's someone dying or someone being injured, trying to serve and defend our country. And so they have a day of overwhelming, and the whole country feels the loss. It's not about like our Memorial Day where it's about hot dogs and Chevrolets and beers and apple pies and sales. There are no sales. There are no hot dogs. It's a day of intense memory. And then the very next day, there's, over-the-top kind of celebration. There are parades and things like that for Yom HaAtzmaut. Yom Yerushalayim is a day when we celebrate the reunification of Jerusalem. And then the next holiday, which is coming up this weekend, is Tisha B'Av, which is the 9th day of the month of Av. And we're in Av now. And Av, the 9th day actually is Shabbat this year. It starts Friday night, the 9th day of Av, and continues all day Saturday. But because it's a day of intense mourning, it is the day that we commemorate the destruction of the first temple. It's a day when we commemorate the destruction of the second temple. Both of those things happened on Tisha B'Av. Those are devastating things that changed Judaism forever. And it is the day that there are a bunch of fasting days, like Esther fasted to try to get ready for the brave moment that she had to speak with the king and try to save her people. And so there are people who will fast before Purim, and the firstborn will fast the day before Passover to remind us of the last plague of the killing of the firstborn. There are a number of times during the year when there are fast days on the calendar. Many of them, not every Jew does. But of all of these fast days, most Jews will do Yom Kippur. And if they're inclined to do any other fast day, it will be Tisha B'Av. It will be the 9th day of Av. This year it falls on Shabbat. We will not commemorate Tisha B'Av on Shabbat because you can't have, even if you were in mourning, God forbid, for an immediate relative, you would suspend your mourning on Shabbat. Shabbat is a day that God commanded has to be a joyous day. It has to be a day not of mourning things. So this year we are commemorating Tisha B'Av on Sunday. So we will have our Tisha B'Av commemoration starting Saturday night. I'll send out an email to everybody soon about how that plays out. We're going to be at Agudath Achim for that. Yeah.
I was really impressed when she heard about this. Explain how they use the sirens.
Yeah, so in Israel, there are 3 days, there are 2 days that they do sirens as in the whole country. A siren will blow in the evening and in the morning for 2 whole minutes for Yom HaShoah, for the Holocaust Memorial Day, and Yom HaZikaron for Israeli Memorial Day for the fallen soldiers. And the whole country just stops. Recently, if you do computer things, you can find that on YouTube. There are like videos all over the place now that show you're on the highway, and it's the most amazing. Israel is not a big country. It's the most amazing thing to know that there's a siren that blows that the whole country hears at the same time. And when the whole country hears it, it stops. You stop whatever you're doing. If you're on the highway, you stop. You get out of your car and you stand for 2 moments. I would like to say 2 minutes of silence, but there's a siren blowing. But it's still a 2 minutes of remembrance, of mindfulness. If you're at home, you stop and you stand. If you're shopping, you're in a movie theater, wherever you are, you stop whatever you're doing, and the whole country stands in silence and in commemoration. And it's the most powerful thing to know that you are connected to everyone in that moment. And it is a very powerful thing. It's a really powerful thing. I tried to be, when I was in Israel for Yom HaShoah, I tried to be at Yad Vashem during the moment when they would blow the siren. And one of the most powerful things to me that happens on these Memorial Days is when the Israeli flag is half-mast. Some of you have heard me talk about that before. I was a Girl Scout. I learned about the laws of the flag. I learned about how you set a flag to half-mast and why you do it. And I always saw it as being honoring those who died. When I saw the Israeli flag at half-mast, I knew how hard it was to get to the point when we could raise a flag over our own country again. 2,000 years, and we're finally raising the flag over our own country again. And to have to bring that down again, the immense pain that it takes to bring it down again, I saw half-mast in a new way. And when I came back from Israel, I saw the American flag at half-mast in a new way also. I didn't see it as just honoring. I saw the pain that it takes to get it to that point. And it was powerful. And those are especially on those siren days. Anyway, that's a really fast run through, and I'm not sure that it helped exactly. I'm sure I forgot some things. Trying to do this all in 1 hour is not so easy. So we will have more times to discuss these things. But what would you like to talk about? Next week may be our last Basic Judaism class for the summer. I haven't figured that out yet. I know that next week is our last Aleph Bet class for the summer for now, for the Aleph Bet part at least. We'll talk about that next week. We'll see how we do, what we do. It could be that we'll continue, but the plan was just through July so far. So what would we like to do for our last class of Basic Judaism? Is there something specific that you feel like is still a lack? Yeah, Angie's got good ideas so far. Did we do prayer? I think we did prayer.
Well, we talked about the Shema, you're right.
We did. We talked about prayer, and maybe there's more about prayer that we need to do, but we did one about prayer. We did do prayer. So is there something else that you feel that there's a gap about that you would very much like to learn? You know, normally when I do a Basic Judaism class, we talked about topics that I don't always cover, and I loved that. But normally I also do a life cycle one, that we talk about all the Jewish life cycles and what to expect and what you do. Would that be okay if we did life cycles next week then? All right, so next week will be about life cycles. And then if you've got more questions after that, let me know, and we'll see if we can continue, because I have no problem with continuing these. Thank you very much.